This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special bonus episode of the DCAU Review. I'm your host, Liam, with your other host, Cal, joining me, as always. Cal, we're here on a very special occasion. After all, it is ongoing, at time of at least original recording. We are smack dab in the midst of SuperFantasMonth. And the whole reason that this got started is because of a couple of the live-action movies that are hitting theaters this month, July of 2025. And the first of the two, the Super in SuperFantasMonth, hit theaters this weekend with the new Superman film. And we just wanted to kind of hop on and chat about it. We did one of these for The Batman a couple of years ago and got a lot of good feedback on it. So we were both able to find time to see it opening weekend. So I'm excited to just kind of freewheel discuss kind of whatever comes to mind. We don't really have like a big structure to this. We're just going to talk about what we like, what we didn't like, and maybe some of the Easter eggs, and maybe some comparisons to other versions of Supermans, including ones relevant to this podcast. But I've talked enough now. I'm excited to chat about this with you.
Yeah, it is something we've been looking forward to for a while. As you said, we don't typically do this except for maybe an occasional. Well, let's be honest here. It's been a controversial couple of years for DC films in the live action realm here. So, we finally bid farewell to the old universe, and there's a new universe that's been established here. And I'm excited to kind of chat with you about this. So I think we should kind of just start off with a very simple: did we like it? So I will ask you, did you like it? And if we're giving this, I don't know, out of 5 stars, how many stars would you bestow upon this Superman 2025 film?
We're not Meltzer in this. We're going to keep it to 5. But but yes, I did like it. I think I don't publicly announce this very often because it's really more of a journaling exercise for me, but I am one of those guys with a Letterboxd account. So officially my rating was 4 stars for this movie. So I liked it quite a bit, and I'll throw the ball back over to you. Where did you settle on it? You've seen it, little inside baseball. You've seen it much more recently. I saw it on a couple nights ago, whereas you, like minutes ago, just left the theater, so it's very fresh for you.
I think I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was an enjoyable experience. I think the headline for this, if we were posting articles about this, or if people reported on our podcast, I think the headline that people could grab from this is that James Gunn did something that I thought that I would never happen again to me in my life, and that is he got me back into the movie theater. Movie. I don't think we've talked about it on the air here, but I just, after COVID and after the fact that movies are extremely expensive these days, and there's not a lot of original material, and things are immediately seemingly available for streaming within, like, I don't know, it feels like days after it's released in the theaters. To me, that kind of eliminates the need to go to a foreign room with a group of strangers to watch the movie, even if the screen is really, really large. But James Gunn, by golly, did it. Like, I think everything from the marketing and the trailers, and kind of just the way that things were handled leading up to it, I think piqued my interest enough where this is the first movie, other than a re-release of Return of the Jedi, for I guess that was its 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
23. I think I've seen one movie. I saw The Batman, obviously, in theaters, and I saw that twice, so that would have been 2022. So I saw that movie twice in 2022, And I think before that, I maybe saw the last Spider-Man movie, which
Hmm.
I don't know what year that was. Was that also 2022?
I think that was December of maybe 21.
Okay, yeah. It's been few and far between. So the first time in a couple years. All that to say, going into it, I was like, I really hope this is really good because I don't do this very often, and I feel like I don't need to do this. Will I need to will that be reinforced or will that be disproven by this movie? And I will say, splurged, went saw an IMAX, and
Nice.
I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I think I would probably settle for looking at stars here. I would also probably settle around the 4 star mark. It's not a perfect movie.
Hmm.
I think it is, however, it feels like it redefines for me what I would hope to see for both the DC universe and maybe just superhero movies in general going forward. In
Hmm.
that, I left the movie theater feeling not like I had just gone through a browbeating marathon where I was being told, what to think or what to believe. But I didn't feel like that this was a one side of the aisle or other uh directive from this movie. I think the director subtly included his own commentary, of course. But I also didn't feel like I was bogged down by like a gritty, dark, heavy, realistic, quote unquote, grounded story that I feel like, and this is not just to throw shade at the Snyderverse because I enjoyed some of those movies, but I felt like
Hmm.
I left the theater feeling a little bit lighter. And I think everything from the way that the cinematography looks and the way that things did seem to be brighter, even though a lot of it is CGI. That didn't completely remove me from the experience either. And yeah, I think overall, this, in some form or fashion, James Gunn restored my faith in seeing movies in the theater. So, congratulations to him. I look forward to whatever the next installment of the DC universe is here in the next several years.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great testament to one effectiveness of a marketing campaign and the trailers and everything to get you excited enough to go out when it's not a usual activity. Me on the other hand, I'm such something of a theater hooer. I'll go see anything in theaters practically. So, but I did spring for like the special Dolby Ultra. That the theater I go to doesn't have IMAX screens, but I did spring for
Okay.
the more expensive screening as well. So yeah, so we can kind of go big picture thoughts. This is your official, and we'll put this like on the description and stuff. We're gonna be pretty freewheeling about the spoilers, and
Mhm.
I don't really want to like handcuff us by like being like this is the non-spoiler section and the spoiler section. So I would just suggest if spoilers are a thing that you care about, maybe come back and after you've seen the movie.
Sure.
And yes, this is your official spoiler warning. But yes, as far as like if you were looking to see what we thought before you went and made plans to see it yourself, I think the headline is a big thumbs up. But yeah, so we can start to nail down our thoughts a little bit more here, Cal. So yeah, I think for me, one of the things that stood out to me immediately, which is if you've seen all those trailers that we just talked about, pretty much all the footage in those trailers is from like the first 25-30 minutes of the movie.
Hmm.
Like it's very front loaded. So and I think that in some ways did lead to me feeling like the first hour was a little sluggish because I'm like, all right, let's get to some stuff I didn't
Right.
know was coming. Like
Right.
and we certainly do later in the movie, but but I also think that's a was a big swing because I feel like a
Sure.
lot of movie trailers, especially superhero movies, you can kind of be like, all right, that's from the third act, that's from the opening scene when the characters meet for the first time. Like this is like you can kind of piece together what the movie's going to be before you see it. So this one I think did a much better job of uh hiding what its second and third acts were going to really be, which is a credit to it. But I think just overall, yeah, the vibes of this are very earnest, and I appreciated that. There was something that I thought, because this is very proudly, science fiction, comic booky, cartoony, you could even say in some ways, but without the necessity to layer it in like irony. I think that's, and I don't want to turn this into like a criticism of Marvel movies or even some other DC movies, but like I think that's sometimes a writer's way of like trying to insulate the movie from criticism,
right?
Is to, well, if we make the jokes about how silly this all is, then then the audience will accept it, and the critics won't be able to use that as a reason why our movie is bad. So so I love how kind of earnestly comic booky this is.
Agreed.
But I also think it doesn't do that in a way that and it's hard because we're so in the bubble doing a DC cartoon podcast and being, guys that have read comic books our whole lives. And
sure.
But it's like it didn't feel like they got so in the weeds on it that it was inaccessible to people either. If you're not, if maybe the only Superman is, say, the Christopher Reeve version or the Henry Cavill version or a cartoon or whatever, I feel like you could settle into this pretty easily, not knowing much about Superman, and you just kind of accept like, yep, there's a bunch of other superheroes that are active, and sometimes just like a giant monster shows up and they fight it, and there's interdimensional gateways and clones and all this stuff. They just kind of go here. It's like, here's the deal, here are the rules, and now we're off to the races. And I kind of appreciated that as a point of difference without having to do a lot of, winking at the camera or apologizing for itself.
You mean how in every movie, a superhero movie in the last decade, like they don't ever mention the hero's name, and then somebody mentions calling them that as like a joke, and they all roll their eyes about it and snicker.
Yes.
And how in this movie, like, there's a Green Lantern, a Hawk Girl, Metamorpho. Like there's just these Mr. Terrific. Like these are the names of the characters, and that's just their names. Like people call them that. There's no like, oh my gosh, this is so dumb. Like there is a suspension of disbelief and maybe in a way that is endearing, a lack of self-awareness for the characters that are in the show, which is good, which is important, which, as you mentioned, like this is I wholeheartly agree with you. I think the idea that this felt like a comic book universe, that it was, you were kind of dropped in the middle of, which you were. And I like that. I feel like it's almost a lost art when it comes to movies these days, that we got everything we needed to know within the first 60 seconds of the film with text on the screen. We figured out what metahumans are. Here, these are what metahumans are. So we're not going to refer to them as superheroes. Some people are going to call them metahumans. All right, so later in the movie, when the government is meeting with Lex Luthor to talk about metahumans, you can refer back to that text at the beginning. Okay, metahumans are what we refer to as heroes. Got it. Okay. There are multiple metahumans that exist on Earth. Got it. We got the whole backstory of Superman. All right, he was raised by parents in Kansas. If you didn't know that already, great, here you go. And then later, when Lois takes him to Kansas to recover from his kryptonite poisoning, you don't have to spell out, oh, this is Ma and Pa Kent. Like, got it. These are the parents that they talked about in the text. Same with why he's, getting this video feed from alien parents in Krypton. He was sent to Earth 30 years ago. Like, all of that is kind of spelled out for you in a information dump at the very beginning, which some of the best movies, arguably one of the best movie series of all time with Star Wars, has a huge text dump at the beginning. It's the signature for every one of its movies. So why other movies don't or feel the need to like, all right, we got to spend 20 minutes explaining all of this other stuff and wasting screen time. And my movie now goes from, an hour and 55 minutes to 3.5 hours because we had to show Clark's rocket landing in a field in Kansas. Like,
Right.
yeah, great. This is established. We know this already. This is fun. But yeah, as far as the feeling of the movie, it is very, I think it very much leans into its roots as a comic book. And I think that makes it more fun. We don't, the scene with the kaiju, which is heavily featured in the marketing, which makes it, I thought that was going to be the culmination of the movie. It's really like Lex Luthor drops the kaiju in the middle of Metropolis as a distraction so that he can do something else. And that part is, again, it's just kind of accepted that this is going on in the middle of Metropolis. There's another battle that's happening between the Justice Gang and this quote unquote interdimensional imp that's just happening off in the distance during one of the most romantic and important relational moments between Lois and Superman in the movie. And so it very much feels like, okay, we're in a universe where this stuff happens. Everybody doesn't have to stand their mouth agape for, 20 minutes or roll their eyes or struggle with accepting what this is. There is a little bit of that. All right, we're in a comic book universe, so the characters don't need to pause and scratch their chins or the tops of their heads every single time that something that if we were to experience that, don't understand. And I did appreciate that as well, because it does then make it feel like a comic book.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of that, and I think right. I think this walks a tight rope, as mentioned, because I think there are things like certain characterizations, like I don't know of too many, and again, maybe this is recency bias. Like, there have been very few, I think, pure distillations of a comic book character to screen than Guy Gardner in this movie. like the the crap talker that, underneath it all, he has a heart of gold, but even when he's doing the right thing, he's going to be like loud and obnoxious about it. I think so. I thought that was great. So it's like, it's plenty comic booky enough, while I think not being, and I think audiences, I think especially you see that now with what, in this era when there's constantly news articles and like the trades, if you follow like Hollywood Reporter, about like, well, there's such this crisis. How do we get people back to theaters? How do we get people like yourself, Cal, back to theaters? And it's like, I think for a lot of people, it is, they want to be taken on a ride. They want to buy into, a big bombastic blockbuster event. And this, I think, fits that bill for your layman, moviegoer who just, is going to see this because it's a big summer blockbuster, and it's also, plenty nerdy and comic booky enough to satiate guys like us as well. So I think it walks a really interesting tightrope. Kind of jumping around here. Casting wise, obviously David Corn Sweat as Superman, and we'll start there. I think it's always best to kind of, I feel like Superman's one of those characters where you want a semi unknown or an unknown actor. I know he's been in other stuff, but he's never been like the starring role in a big budget movie like this before. So I feel like it was very easy to accept him as this world Superman. And he like, again, talking about his earnestness, like he's a dork. Like he says like, what the heck at one point, and he's like, there's actually, this is in one of the credit scenes, so it's the spoileriest thing, but it's like, oh darn it, I'm such a jerk sometimes when he makes Mr. Terrific feel bad about something. Like, it's like he's such a, he's kind of a cornball, but again, in a way that's not played so much like he's putting on an act, like it is like the Christopher Reeve version, for instance, which I love that version of his Clark Kent too. I think it's really fun and charming, but to see, it's like, no, this is like who he is at his core, is this kind, guy. I mean, they literally there's a big speech he gives in near the end of the movie where he just spells out what the movie's about.
Right.
But where he's like, yeah, like he's a guy who is trying to do his best, and he doesn't always do the right thing, but he's always trying to, and that's what makes him Superman. It's ultimately not just it's not that he's always there, every second of every day helping every person. It's not that he always does the right thing every single time on the first try, but it's that he's always trying to do the right thing, and ultimately is, as we see in that third act, is also an inspiration to the other people around him to bring them into action and bring them into helping him save the day. And I think, like, we've heard a lot over the last maybe decade or so about Superman as like the symbol of hope, and this and I feel like sometimes we talk more about how he's a symbol of hope than we actually show him being that symbol and being that, that guy who makes everyone around him want to be a better person. And I think one of the things this movie does well, especially in the back half, is, when you see Metamorpho and Green Lantern and Hawkgirl spring into action to save the much less militarized nation that's being invaded by their neighbors. Boy, that we'll talk about that later.
I think I said this movie wasn't political, but
right.
but I mean, there were definitely parts that were political, but I came out of it not feeling like I was being preached at or like I was being beat over the head with somebody's political opinions. But yes, there is definitely parts of it that are inherently political, and that they're, somebody will probably, I think I saw that one of the foremost talking heads in the conservative movement didn't care for the movie, I think, because they felt it hit a little too close to home. So, but that's how things are. That's how some people won't like that.
Well, and that's a point I know we've talked about it on the show, and we've probably talked about it in our personal lives many times. Like, I mean, comics have always used political imagery and metaphor. Superman was created by two Jewish men in the 1930s. Like, it's not, you cannot complete, like, you're right that, that this movie is not overly preachy beyond a basic message of, like, you should value human life.
Right.
All human life is valuable, and you should try to do your best to be kind.
Right.
And, and give yourself a break, and give other people around you, the same grace that you hope to have, treat, as the Bible verse, the golden rule is, do unto others if you would have them do unto you. That's kind of like, that's the most, like, preachy this movie gets. Sure. But it also, again, I think works totally within the context, because he's specifically giving that speech to Lex, who represents, the evil, everything that's evil, both in comic book villain, and maybe he resembles a few real life figures we could recognize as well. But again, it's not so clear. It's like, okay, he's Lex isn't a direct analog for Elon Musk or Donald Trump or any controversial lightning rod political figure on the right or the left. But it's like the strongest stance it takes is definitely to be like, I don't think unarmed civilians should be murdered. But for the most part, it's a lot of just like, yeah, it's just he is a guy, and by virtue of his inherent goodness and his inherent beliefs that were instilled in him by his parents, both sets, as we come to see in this film, that's sort of the message that he inspires around the world, is that it might be complicated. You might sometimes make things worse when you're trying to help, but ultimately, like, it's about where your heart lies, and that you're trying to do the right thing, and that you'll keep trying even if you screw up here and there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that his Superman ultimately, because I think it's where we started here, with Mr. Cornsweat's Superman portrayal. I think it's good. I felt like when he was cast that I was going to have a difficult time, because I really enjoyed Henry Cavill as Superman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever feel like most people that appreciated that universe, I think a lot of people were rooting for him to get another chance at a solo Superman movie, or a movie that at least featured him in a major role and didn't have him
Hmm.
kind of deceased for most of it, like we got in the in the Snyder verse, or maybe playing second fiddle a little bit in the Batman v Superman movie. So, um, so I think accepting Mr. Cornsweet as Superman was a little bit difficult at first after the casting, but I think I warmed up to it, and I think ultimately it took me about 25 seconds to feel like, okay, this is Superman once the movie started. I do think he kind of is an amalgamation of a bunch of different versions of Superman. He's
Hmm.
definitely more lighthearted. He's definitely like, I feel like the criticisms from the from Lex Luthor's army of angry online monkeys, as were portrayed in the film.
Now,
That's
why would James Gunn have an axe to grind with online Twitter trolls trying to run someone's name through the mud?
I,
I don't know. It's a mystery.
yeah, it was just he's just out here, shooting blind at nobody in particular, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I did appreciate that. But I think that, he is like I said, an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. You could definitely see a little bit of Christopher Reeve version. I think a
Hmm.
little bit more, especially in the Clark Kent. We don't get a ton of Clark in like public facing Clark Kent in
Yeah.
this. I think it's maybe just the one scene where he's in the Daily Planet in the
Hmm.
early part of the movie. But um, I think though what really, really drove it home for me is, he, even in the midst of his battling with the kaiju, or his interactions with the Justice Gang, or his interactions with some of the other characters, Lois in particular, I think that there was always, even at times where he was frustrated, angry, upset, the that idea that they drive home that he just sees the best in everybody, which I think is such a core principle of the Superman character that you need.
Hmm.
His acting, like I believed that in the way that he smiled and the way that he talked to people, the way that he looked at people, even the battle with the kaiju where he's frustrated with the Justice Gang because they kill this thing and he wanted to save it and take it to an intergalactic zoo. Like that I thought was great. Like this Superman was beyond frustrated that they decided just to rid the world of this thing as opposed to try and care for it and spare its life. So um, yeah, I think that comes out in his acting, and I honestly, like, I got choked up at this in the scene with him and Pa Kent.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I thought that sequence, and it's interesting because I think the thing that I dislike the most about this, and I think that some people will probably could take offense to or dislike, is that he really, James Gunn decided to really dumb down Martha and Jonathan Kent. Like they feel like a stereotype of what you would see. Like think of a dumb quote unquote Southern American, and that's what, like,
Sure.
that's kind of it feels like a stereotype of them. They have I mean, there was obviously, it's played for comedy. They're not mocked. They're not, called stupid or anything like that, but it's very clear that they are just kind of what you would imagine a middle American, if you would think like a prototypical middle American stereotype, that's kind of what these guys are.
Yes.
But the sequence that he has with Pa, and this is after he's been poisoned with kryptonite, and Lois figures out to take him into hiding, to take him back home to Kansas, and we just get this beautiful interaction where she finally sees, like, she's been struggling to kind of understand who this person is as
Hmm.
Clark and Superman, and she finally kind of is absorbing his life in Kansas and what he kind of grew up with and who he is with his parents. And then you get this beautiful scene where Pa, after Clark comes to grips with the idea that he was sent to Earth to conquer it by his parents, and he feels like, he's got imposter syndrome almost, that like he doesn't even know who he is. And
Hmm.
Pa just sits there and just breaks down crying, tells him how proud he is of him. And like you can watch the emotion on Mr. Cornsweat's face, and he just kind of gets this, you can tell he like breaks down, he puts his head, I mean it's in the trailers, he puts his forehead to Jonathan's head and just embraces him, and it's this really emotional swell. I was like, yep, that's it. This he's won me over for the next, make 50 more Superman movies with him. I don't care. Like he's Clark Kent, he's Superman, he embodies it both. Like it's really, really strong. I think that I think though that those the fact that he embodies both of them, because it was hard for me, I think, at times to see Henry Cavill as Clark. Again, we don't get a ton of him as Clark, but so not necessarily his fault. But in this, I think James Gunn and then Mr. Cornsweat's, acting kind of really brought that home to me, that this is Clark and Superman. Like this is the guy.
Yeah, that scene at the Kent farm I also got very emotional. There's a couple times where I got a little teary eyed, and that was certainly one of them, because it is this moment, and I think it is interesting. And we're really not trying to constantly compare this to the Snyder version or the Cavill version, I swear, or any other version. But I think you could note, especially in Batman v Superman, some of the same themes of like Superman getting involved with foreign governments and his role in a modern America, and there's obviously like a metatextual level to that, of like, is an old fashioned 1930s comic strip character like Superman who's gonna smile and puff out his chest and tell everybody to eat their vegetables. Does that guy still work in a modern world? Like obviously there's a meta layer to that as well, but there is, like, I think, for better or worse, the decision was made, I think, to make Cavill's Superman kind of ambivalent to humanity. like he's not really sure if he wants to help people or if he should just like disappear forever and go hibernate. And again, I think for that movie, that's a fine choice, and it's it's definitely a different take. I'm not there to criticize that, but this is a breath of fresh air. I think your heart breaks for Clark more and Superman more in the lead up to that scene on the farm, because you get this sense that he is earnestly trying to do his best, and he is, like we've already talked about, and he's just been kind of beaten down by cynicism, and in this case, a billionaire with limitless resources that's a genius and also has a personal vendetta against him, and all this other stuff. And then also the fact that even people close to him, like Lois, have questioned if he's doing the right thing. And so he has this kind of crisis mixed in with this revelation that the message that his parents left for him in the Fortress of Solitude, that had been damaged, that he had never really heard the whole message of, was apparently revealed to suggest that they actually saw him, envision him going to Earth to conquer it, rather than to, be its savior or its fireman, so to speak. And how that moment where I think it would have been really easy to have Pa Kent just be like, well, that's not what you should do, Clark. This is what you should do. But instead, he gives him this speech about how, like, the role of he starts talking about like the role of a parent and fatherhood, and how, and ultimately that's kind of Superman's role with the fictional world. And I think with us, the audience watching him, it's not his role to point the finger at you and say, this is what you're going to be, and this is what you have to do. It's to give you guidance when you need it, and try to look up. But ultimately, it's like, as Pa says, it's going to be your own actions, your own choices are ultimately what are going to define you, not what your parents say you should be, not what anyone else in the world says it should be. It's like, what are you gonna do? And he says, like, someone who is and your actions, Clark, make me so proud. And it's that moment where he doesn't just say like, don't listen to that father figure, listen to this father figure. He reinforces Clark's own choices and reinforces that Clark, again, while not perfect, has always tried to do the right thing, and that's how he knows that he's not a monster the way that he kind of is feeling like he is at this point. So I think that scene on the farm, it reminded me a lot of some of the bits of Superman for All Seasons by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, which is one of my favorite comics ever. There's a lot of stuff of Clark on the farm kind of having crisis of conscience in those issues. So that is another, I think, great example of kind of taking a pretty purely distilled from the comic page to the movie characterization, even though, to your point, the Kents kind of do have this layer that we don't really see, where they're more definitely more down home southern Midwest farmer, like simple folk energy to them, but it's still kind of that encouragement that he gets from Pa that ultimately is there to inspire him to put the suit back on and get back out there. And then, which again, and like I said, that also then shepherds us through the rest of the film, where, because there's this, over the top sci-fi plot where basically the entire Earth is being split in half by an interdimensional portal that Lex Luthor opened on purpose to try to draw Superman out, one of those. Because of that, like, Superman can't, when these two warring nations are about to be in conflict again, and there's the child with holding up the flag with the Superman shield on it. Like, it would have been, and like, I think thematically, to have him like get there at the last second and save the day and save the kid, like, you could have done that, and I think that would have been enjoyable for an audience to see. But I think to really instead nail down the idea of what Superman again should mean, and the whole theme of the movie, like that whole side of the movie of not pointing the finger in your face, like we just talked about, with whether it's politics or social commentary, but just to kind of shepherd us along to where Guy Gardner and Metamorpho and all of them make the decision to go in and step in and save the day themselves, is great. And it's I think that whole last act, which I think otherwise could have felt very, very samey as far as comic book movies, instead of like a big blue laser in the sky, it's a weird like parting of the Red Sea where the city's cracking in half, but it would feel very comic, like samey to a lot of modern comic book movies, without, I think, that element of reinforcing why, what galvanizes the other heroes of this world to get involved finally, and to kind of take a fixed moral stand in this moment, as opposed to just kind of riding the fence as they have been previously. So I think that's really good. That's and again, a lot of that comes from Mr. Corn Sweat's performance, certainly. The rest of this cast, I'll be honest, it took me a while to settle into Nicholas Hoult as Lex. Mm-hmm. And I think I realized that, like, at a certain point it clicked with me that, like, he's not going for a Gene Hackman type of Lex,
right?
Where you're supposed to think he's kind of like funny and charismatic. Nor is he going for a Michael Rosenbaum where you're supposed to like feel sorry for him or see him as a more like, it's like, no, this guy is I was like, I think the thing I don't like about him is that he plays a very fundamentally unlikable guy.
You mean he's evil?
Yes, he is, in fact, which can maybe bring us into our something we talked about a little bit off the air, which is that a fair few people on the Twitters and the Reddits have compared this pretty directly to a DCAU version of, I think, especially Superman and Lex. And I guess we can talk about here, do we feel like those comparisons are apt, especially in Holt's portrayal as Lex, and we've already kind of talked about David as Superman, but that sort of overarching thing of just having a Lex that he's not particularly charismatic. He doesn't really have a lot of redeeming qualities. He's just really smart and a jerk. Like that's kind of it. And very
Yeah,
rich.
yeah. So there are a couple things that I think the tone of the film overall just kind of being lighter and brighter when it comes to a superhero film. Maybe that's one of the things that people are pointing to, or or getting that feeling of like a DCAU cartoon because we talked
Mhm.
about it. I mean, the DCAU, while it was, you know, mainly a children's cartoon. It's designed and marketed towards children. It's written for the appreciation of adults and kids, and that's why the stories and the characterizations and the shades of gray and the different psychological elements of the characters is ultimately what drew and what adults in and what makes those cartoons. That's why we're doing a that's why we have a full-time podcast that we do discussing this, 30 some years later after it started. So, I can see that, I feel like, in some of the aspects that there are light friendly kid friendly elements to this. Of course, Crypto being a recurring character, there's, lighthearted jokes and physical humor and slapstick that occurs, kind of typical for a James Gunn directed film. But I think, yeah, some of the psychological stuff and the fact that I hadn't quite bought or seen, I feel like, the DCAU comparison until the final scene with Lex and Superman, where we have this back and forth verbal spar between Lex, it really explaining as Superman is being beat down by Ultraman slash spoiler alert Bizarro. He tells him why he feels justified in doing what he's doing. He looks at himself as advocating and protecting for humanity, and also has this jealous nature. Like he thinks that he should be the hero of the world as the human with the brain and the brilliance that he has and the things that he's able to accomplish with his fame and fortune and his mind, and therefore Superman getting adoration and praise because he can fly and was gifted with these things naturally. It creates this jealousy, and he wants to kill him. So it's multifaceted there. And then Superman's retort explaining to Lex, as you mentioned, that he is human. He experiences very human things. Like Lex looks at him as this alien from outer space that is just that, an alien, and therefore needs to be destroyed, and versus realizing that Clark is actually more human most of the time, in dealing with his insecurities and dealing with his general range of emotion, his folly with his love life, his trying to balance being a hero and a reporter, dealing with criticism, all of that stuff. So I kind of then saw in that verbal sparring at the end, I was like, okay, I think this is something that you could see, our Bruce Timm Superman and Lex Luthor verbally sparring over this point at some point in the DCAU. So I can see that. I can see that. I can see then kind of backtracking, looking at some of the deeper psychological themes that we have going on here that are kind of interspersed between these colorful, fanciful sci-fi battles that are occurring on screen, and amusing interactions between people. I will say, and I'll get your response to that, but I also saw it in Lois Lane a lot. I think the characterization of Lois is maybe the closest thing I've ever seen to a Dana Delaney Lois Lane in live action. But yeah, as far you can see it in that final interaction between Lex and Superman.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit. There's a bit near the end because part of the mystery of the film, you learn pretty early on that Lex is in cahoots with this evil dictator of the one nation, and the reason is why. And there's a moment where it's like, oh, it's because he's very Gene Hackman-y. He's doing like a real estate scam. He's gonna basically be in charge of like half of a nation, of the territory that's divvied up after they invade this neighboring country. And then he has the moment where he goes, no, 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 no. I didn't try to kill Superman so I could do this. I created this like military action because I knew it would give me a chance to kill Superman. And I was like, that's pretty Lex.
Yeah.
That's basically the I spent $75 million on a fake presidential campaign to tick Superman off. Like that's a very Clancy Brown Lex, DCAU Lex thing to do. I thought was so I appreciated that little bit of characterization. Definitely agree. Rachel Brosnahan's Lois as well, because again we see that in JLU, and we see that probably some in Superman the animated series as well, of her just because she admires him, and in this case, is falling in love with Clark in the movie, like that she doesn't ever really take the reporter hat off completely.
Mm-hmm.
And she is giving him, she is sort of treating him, it's as close to a hostile interview as I think you could get with somebody that you're in a relationship with. But yeah, I liked her, and ultimately she does. It's all to get to the heart of the truth of what's going on, which is again very Lois Lane, and she isn't perfect. They don't really go into a lot of her specifics, as far as background goes. So I don't know if this is a version that was also raised by like a general and all of that. But I think as far as just being like a tough on Superman, even though she's dating Superman, but ultimately it's because she just wants to make sure that even people she admires, even people that she loves in this case, are being held in check. I mean, that's a huge part of that Cadmus arc of Justice League that we've talked about quite at length over the years, is just kind of the idea of the most powerful man in the world in Superman and his surrounding teammates acting unilaterally, and how that can often be a metaphor for America and really any large nation with a big military, I suppose. But and so I think that's on display here. So I think there's definitely there's some cousin. I don't necessarily feel that they were specifically pulling from a Tim Daly, Dana Delaney, or George Newbern, Dana Delaney for this, but I can definitely see where those comparisons would come in, just based on, again, I think some of the characterization of the Clark and Lois relationship, and also of the Lex and Lois relationship.
Yeah, I would agree. I also feel like you could probably say the way that the other heroes are incorporated also kind of does feel like a JLU episode or something like that. It gives off the same vibes, in that I think we already talked about it, that you didn't have to get the backstory. All right, this is what a Green Lantern is. This is who Mr. Terrific is. This is who Hawk Girl is. We don't really get a real clear explanation for who they are. They show who they are by kind of their actions, and what their interactions are with Superman, and through verbal dialogue and stuff like that. You kind of get names and stuff like that. And then Mr. Terrific, he's really kind of gets the almost second billing here for a lot of the film. When Superman is persona non grata for a portion of this, as he's removed and sent to this pocket dimension, we get a lot of Mr. Terrific, and he really gets to shine. I really liked that. The audience that I was with in watching this really seemed to appreciate Mr. Terrific, and that kind of made me giddy. It's like, all right, cool. We finally have the option or opportunity here in a movie that a lot of people are going to see, to kind of introduce some of these second or third tier or characters that really haven't seen the spotlight as far as major media is concerned. So having these characters, Mr. Terrific included, really get some heavy screen time here and kind of get to show who they are, and just they're treated as on the same level as Superman essentially. So it was kind of nice. So I kind of see that as like, okay, if this was an episode of JLU and you flipped it on, they're not going to take the time to introduce you to each and every character if you've never seen them before. So how do they do that? They kind of tell you through dialogue, through exposition, through whatever actions they're taking. So it doesn't take long to learn, obviously, that Mr. Terrific is super, super smart, genius level, inventor, technologically advanced in what he does. And, he's able to kick butt on a level that is able to almost single-handedly take down a huge portion of Lex's army. So I kind of do see that as well as like another way to kind of get the same DCAU vibes, if you will.
Yeah, him getting like a little like character intro scene just to kind of show off how smart he is and how versatile his T-spheres are is a great bit. And again, it's very very comic booky, and I love the way that scene's shot too. With it's mostly kind of from Lois's perspective while she's in this little force field, and she's just kind of watching all of these things dart around, and him solo the whole Lex or Luthor Corp crew there. That's a lot of fun as well. Some rapid fire things as we go through. There's a really funny subplot in this, which is that Jimmy Olsen is just like an unabashed ladies' man and doesn't even understand why that's funny. That, I mean, one of the big subplots is that Lex's girlfriend, Eve Tessmacher, is like hopelessly in love with Jimmy because they had like a brief fling, and Jimmy is like so completely not into it. And there's a scene where Lois realizes that he has this connection, and she's so flabbergasted by the idea that he is like, I think she even says like, your hot ex-girlfriend. He's like, what do you mean hot? Like he's so oblivious to it, and how like I love the way that subplot, and then it's actually like a relevant thing where it becomes a big part of how like Lois and Jimmy kind of crack the case and get the article published in the third act too. So it ends up being pretty relevant to the plot. But I was like, that's just such a funny bit, because less so in the DCAU perhaps, where he's a weird little pervert. Well, maybe this version is too, just in a different way. But like, I think if you're for a comic book Jimmy Olsen, he is kind of constantly being in like, I mean, he's had his own comics going back to like the 50s. Famously, that's where Darkseid first appears, as in an issue of Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. So like, it's like there is this side of Jimmy Olsen that we've never really seen, I think, in too many other forms of media besides the comics themselves, where he is just kind of off having his own weird little side adventures that that maybe don't even that are that would be like in the background of whatever the big epic superhero thing that's going on, but he's just quietly being turned into turtles or giant, or being cursed by a witch or whatever. And it's like, yeah, just this having a weird little Jimmy Olsen subplot where he's a ladies' man and he uses this girl's infatuation with him to get dirt on Lex, I thought was a really funny gag.
Yeah, I agree. No, there's that feels like, just, I mean, it's obviously played up for comedy, and there were certain elements that you're just going to expect that James Gunn's going to include. But yeah, I thought that was great. But the fact that it wasn't just played for a laugh, that it does pay off, and ultimately is a huge part of the reason why they end up cracking the code and Luthor gets sent to Belle Reve is pretty great. Yeah, it's pretty fun. And I think people maybe that haven't seen the film yet, that were kind of scratching their head when, I think it was either Thursday or Friday, I saw that they were already talking about maybe doing a Jimmy Olsen spin-off television show. People were like, what in the world is going on here? And then you realize, not only is he pretty important to the actual, the actual movie, but the storyline is really funny, and he ends up, kind of setting the precedent here that Jimmy actually could be an interesting character based on these, if they did something akin to that old Superman's pal style where you just kind of you no holds barred write some goofy silly stories here. So Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen is pretty solid, I would agree. Like, he does play it pretty aloof the entire time, but good characterization. He's got some good chemistry with Lois, obviously. But I think as far as the movie's concerned, I think there's a lot here that's done. To me, it also didn't feel, Liam, I don't know, you can correct me. They did a lot of world building, but it didn't feel like this is only being done like the movie only exists to build to the next movie, which I think a lot of superhero movies in all genres these days feel like at times, where you're just, we have 20 minutes of CGI, battle action followed by a 2-minute scene that drops an Easter egg that leads to whatever the next movie that they can do, and then there's another 20-minute scene, and then there's another 3 or 4 Easter eggs that they got to throw in, and then there's another 20 minutes, and then it's the end, and then you get your post credits, and that's where you really sell whatever next movie that you're gonna put out there. And I think obviously there's a lot of stuff that's in here from that is clearly going to set up additional stuff. Whether it's Maxwell Lord, or maybe you go back to Metamorpho's origins with Skag Industries, or Rick Flag, or all these other things that are kind of set up along the way. But it didn't feel like this is just a 2-hour stop here to just get you to the next thing that they can slop on the screen to then push you to the next big thing. I didn't feel like that for this movie, at least.
No, yeah, to your point, obviously with the Justice Gang characters, and the Max Lord connection and all of that, certainly feels like those are threads you can pick up. We even get a very brief John Cena Peacemaker cameo in the middle of the film as like a talking head on a fake.
Definitely fake Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. The hair.
When he crossed his arms, I was like, Michael Ian Black is playing. He is just
channeling him.
Right. It was eerie. I chuckled.
Yeah, that was a great gag. But so we know there's other heroes out here. Frank Grillo playing Rick Flag Sr. and part of like the Pentagon meetings. He's already appeared in animation in the Creature Commandos show. So like there certainly is bits and pieces here that I'm sure we'll pick up on. There's maybe the biggest, like, I feel like I had heard this as a rumor, but I hadn't heard anyone out and out say it. We do get a glimpse of Supergirl very briefly at the end as well. Who of course has her own movie coming next year, I believe, at least as of now. Always expect any big studio superhero thing to be delayed at least 2 more times before it actually comes out. But as of now, I believe it's coming next year. So there's certainly things in this movie that will pick up, the threads from here. But yes, to their point, it felt more like even with, we do get the 2 little credit scenes, but they're very, very not intentionally. It felt like not going, here's an ad for the next movie. Which I appreciated. Like it's a fun little couple, like a comedic beat, like we said with Superman and Mr. Terrific, and then a shot that I think kind of mirrors one of the All-Star Superman issues, where it's which again has already been used in a ton of the marketing, which is Superman sitting on the moon looking down at Earth with Crypto in his arms. So that's a great bit. We haven't even talked about Crypto, real star of this film.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yes, that's I think I appreciated that. Again, like many comics, you could almost see like in a comic book when Peacemaker showed up, there would be like a little editor's note, and it would be like, see Peacemaker Volume 1 to catch up on what he's been up to. If like it's there if you want it,
Sure.
but it's not so central to this comic book that we're reading that it takes us out of it. And we go, oh my god, I gotta go track down this other issue to find out what's going on here. It's it's not a 9-part crossover spread across 9 different series necessarily. So yeah, I do think that's a big feather in this movie's cap, and hopefully will be the way. I mean, if you think about obviously the MCU being the most successful version of a shared universe ever in the history of movies. I mean, the first Iron Man, it had its little teases, its little references, but it was the mission statement was more, let's just make a good movie about Iron Man first,
Sure.
and then if people like it, we'll do more. Like so.
No,
I think that's obviously they've already announced projects. We already know there's more coming, so it's not quite the same thing. But ultimately, it feels like the idea here was, let's make a good movie and then sprinkle a few things that we can come back to later if we want, but nothing that nothing that felt like a neon billboard, to your point, for the next thing.
yeah, it was a bit refreshing on a level that I kind of went in thinking, especially when the marketing has Green Lantern and Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl and Metamorpho. It's like, oh, we're all right, here we go. Let's figure out how much of this movie is going to be spent setting up a bunch of other stuff, which again, I think there are things that they could follow up on. Characters like Metamorpho and his Martian baby looking child, or if they're going to do whatever the next, obviously, as you mentioned, the reveal that Crypto at the end is only with Superman because he belongs to Supergirl, and Superman's watching her or watching Crypto while she is off on red sun planets getting drunk is pretty funny. And certainly sets up some intrigue as to what Kara's role is in this universe. But I didn't know where to slot this, maybe during our DCAU talk, but I guess I'll say this before we kind of take it home with any final thoughts here. But the villains for this, ultimately you have Ultraman / ultimately revealed as Bizarro, which when his mask comes off, I just pictured Todd McFarlane rubbing his hands together, like he cannot wait to release the Ultraman standalone figure with removable or with the mask unmasked version of that figure, and selling it for as much as he sold the Ultraman figure for, making people pay $25 just to get a maskless face. Love you, Todd, if you're listening. You're not, but I love you. Yeah, my other thought was, so you have this other character, the engineer, who is, she's made up of nanites. They got nanites in there. I mean, we know that's a cartoon staple and a comic book staple these days, but that also feels very DCAU. But I thought, as I'm watching her try and drown Superman with nanites at the end, I was like, oh, James Gunn just took ink from Batman Beyond and turned her into a nanite creature for this movie, and even did the thing where she tries to kill the hero by flooding him with herself through his mouth, which
yes,
I thought, I was like, oh, this is okay. All right, James, I see you boned up on your DCAU cartoon beforehand. But yeah, I thought, as far as the villains are concerned, obviously Lex is your main villain, but he's more of the brains behind everything versus the actual adversarial fist to fist, hand to hand combat type of fighting. But I did appreciate that we just kind of wrapped things up with this villain kind of very quickly. Superman was able to use his brain to outsmart Luthor, after he realizes that he's using these drones to systematically pick Superman apart, he kind of uses his brain to involve crypto and then outsmarts Luthor. But I I thought that we would see probably more of the Ultraman versus Superman fight. It obviously is pretty brutal at the end. But I also didn't feel like I necessarily missed out on anything in particular. I don't know what your thoughts of the actual villain outside of Luthor perspective looks like.
Yeah, I think they did some cool visualizations of the engineer's powers. Like you said, I liked her inclusion here. I think she's from the Authority comics originally, so which is not a run I'm super familiar with. I know it's very celebrated, um, but yeah, I thought that I thought she was pretty cool. But then yeah, Ultraman. I mean, would it have been cooler if he had a weird white stone face at the end instead of? But I think maybe that would have made it more difficult to see that it was David Corn Sweat. so so maybe that was the simpler route. And also he falls into a portal at the end. He doesn't die or anything, so you could always bring him back as more classic Bizarro, or a more classic Ultraman. He could come out in a red and blue suit with the big U on his chest. So they could,
wow.
They again, they left that open where someone certainly could bring him back in a future movie or whatever. But ultimately it just feels like we need some guys for Superman to punch other than the faceless Lex drone. The Raptors, as they're called, that are all, which I did appreciate because they're all basically in the superpowers armor, the green and purple.
One voiced by Michael Rosenbaum, I believe.
I did see that. Yes, good real life friends with James Gunn. And
speaking of DCAU connections,
absolutely. So it was good to see. Yeah, I think a few Guardians of the Galaxy alumni making it into this one through some through voice cameos, some through more on screen work, but yeah, I think that's like, if you were like, it's not very exciting when he just punched him. But I think what I love about that the Ultraman versus Superman fight we do get at the end there is that there's this line that Lex throws out about how brain beats brawn, and then Superman kind of throws it back in his face when he calls in crypto and sort of makes the connection that all of these floating camera things are sort of how Lex is controlling Ultraman. I thought that was a great bit there, because that's something that I think, because and it's on display in this movie, because Superman is so kind and so willing to sort of see the best in people. I think a lot of times he's written a little bit like naive or even like stupid. And I thought this was a great example of him being like, ultimately he outfoxes Lex. Like that's how
right.
That's how he wins here. It's like he knows he has crypto in his back pocket and he waits for the right moment to call him in. And then he kind of takes advantage at that point and is able to to save the day ultimately. And then he goes and has his final face-to-face showdown with Lex and his little mission control hovercraft that he's floating around in, which again, just super silly and comic booky. But yeah, I think like if you were, so I like that aspect of it, even if the character of Ultraman is not all that interesting in this movie, I think that's worth sacrificing perhaps for that twist on the Lex Superman thing, where Superman's like, actually, not only am I stronger than you, I'm actually smarter than you too. Like I'm actually
right.
Like, I'm actually very clever too. I think is a great bit to throw in there as well. So I appreciated that as a little bit of a wrinkle on the Lex Superman fight, even if it left the guy he punched a bit more generic, unfortunately. But I think a worthy sacrifice in this case.
Yeah, I agree with you. Last bit here before we wrap up, Easter eggs. We already talked a little bit about obviously setting some things up maybe for potential future films, albeit very subtly. But I think my favorite Easter egg has to be, so the Hall of Justice makes an appearance here with our Justice Gang, that being their financed home from Maxwell Lord, I suppose. And Inside the Justice Gang's Hall of Justice is a mural that features a rather large contingency of the Justice Society characters. So I believe the DC Universe Wiki has a complete listing here of them. So Amethyst, Silent Knight, Dolphin, Black Pirate, Shining Knight, Flash, Flash being Jay Garrick, Atomic Knight, Freedom Beast, Wildcat Vibe, Gunfire, Dr. Fate. I'm pretty sure Freedom Beast is the one that I thought was Wanna Beast, maybe?
Yeah.
So with that said, really fun inclusion here. Okay, so Freedom Beast, I'm learning things live on the pod here, was given his powers by Wanna Beast. So that's why
Yes, okay.
Dr. Fate also on there, Gunfire, Vibe, Wildcat. I think I mentioned those, but yeah, lots of that Justice Society characters kind of shown there. Also, of course, Gotham City is mentioned on one of the street signs that are there. As far as other, we mentioned the interdimensional imp that may or may not be Mr. Mixius Spitlick.
Well, it's funny because James Gunn constantly talks about Batmite in interviews, and I think they even talk about him in Peacemaker. Like they made him technically that first season, I think, is a Snyderverse show, but like they talk about him being a real thing. So I'm like, oh,
right.
It could have been Mixie, it could have been Batmite. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's very, very clear there. But yeah, as far as the, those to me are the main things, other than obviously are very, very clear ones that aren't really Easter eggs with Peacemaker showing up and pocket dimensions. There is a character that appears potentially. I didn't know if it was a rejected clone of Superman or if it's supposed to be a white Martian, but there is a Mr. Handsome that's kind of the prison chauffeur that moves Lex around when they're in this pocket dimension. Appears to be potentially some sort of alien creature. And then obviously he gets sent to, him being Lex gets sent to Belle Reve, which is where Task Force X generally originates in the comics. So that was also mentioned. Did I miss any of the major ones? I think that those are the major ones.
Yeah, those are the only ones I could think of. That'll be our action item. If there's ones we forgot, certainly leave us a comment or hit us up on our socials at DCAU Review. But yeah, like I said, there is so much super, there's like, Guy mentions the Green Lantern Corps and the Guardians and things like that. So I think it's already been confirmed that Nathan Fillion is going to be in that Lanterns show, which is I believe supposed to be coming out on the newly renamed HBO Max.
At the time of recording.
If you're
listening to this
called HBO Max
in the future sometime, it could be renamed again.
When it's in the future, when it's called Jeff Bezos's HBO Max is Amazon Prime, disregard this. But for right now, or Disney Plus Max or whatever, you can disregard that. But for now, yeah, it's HBO Max. So that show will be coming out next year. That is going to focus, I think, mostly on Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, it would appear. But it seems that Guy will be floating around in there. And then, like we said, there's a Supergirl movie. We know Jason Momoa is going to be Lobo in that, so there will be some connections. We also at some point have to explain how Peacemaker made it over from the Snyderverse to this universe, or if it's the same guy or not. But we'll see. I believe that Peacemaker season 2 drops later this year. In fact,
maybe a pocket universe. Maybe he
could be.
Maybe we learn he comes through a pocket universe or something like that. Which I don't know if you want to open up that can of worms that the Snyderverse is still out there in the multiverse someplace. But maybe.
I mean, I have thought like someone at some point is going to pitch. Maybe it'll depend on how the Secret Wars movie does financially, but someone's going to pitch a Crisis on Infinite Earths movie one day, and then it'll just be any living actor who ever played a character on screen will probably get the call at that point. Hopefully like actual real actors, not
I was gonna say they're
weird
digital.
CGI puppets of dead actors like in the Flash 2023. Hopefully real actual people this time. But yeah, other than that, I hopefully we're like let's give this like at least a good 5, 8, 10 years before we start thinking about blowing it all out. I think they've started as small as you can in a movie that's about Superman that also features all these other characters, but
Agreed.
started small, and it does. And I mean, that's been a mission statement, at least publicly, that certainly the James Gunn, who is not only the director of this film but the sort of creative director of the whole ongoing saga of these connected movies and shows, is that like we're not greenlighting things if we don't think if the script isn't finished, if we don't think, we're not just going to greenlight it because, well, it's been 2 years and we need to make a Batman movie or
Right.
whatever. I mean, he's talked a lot about that, not only with his version of Batman for this universe, but also the Matt Reeves the Batman sequel, which we've certainly talked about in the past as well on this show. So like I hope that's true, and I hope that if that I hope that that decision remains in his hands.
Right.
Assuming that he's speaking truthfully there, which I would like to think he is. Yeah, I hope that decision isn't taken out of his hands and we get another reboot in 3 years. But hey, I guess trying to put a bow on again this very messy stream of consciousness chat we've had over the last hour or so. A good first start and a good Superman movie in and of itself, with just like I said, a little bit of future things sprinkled throughout that I'm sure will get picked up in other projects going forward.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't think I could put it better than that.
Absolutely. And I did. On another note, we can leave out the baseless speculation station. Maybe that's like a future bonus episode just to of things we think might. But I have seen James Gunn responding on social media to people asking about Superman 2, and he gives a weird answer. He's like, define Superman 2, or there will be a sequel to this, but not necessarily Superman 2. So is it World's Finest? Is it is it another crack at a big screen Justice League? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I don't know if we will get a direct sequel. Maybe that's our other question for folks listening here. Do you want just more Superman, more solo Superman stories? Not totally solo, obviously, but or are you already kind of champing at the bit to see this version of Superman interact with a Batman or a Martian Manhunter or a new Wonder Woman? Or would love to hear what people's thoughts, if they want to kind of stay small for the time being, or if they're ready to kind of branch out already, because I'm sure we'll get there eventually, but hopefully, like we said, it's about quality over quantity this time around.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it is a fun time, certainly, here as we are at the dawn of this new version of the DC universe to figure out, where we go next. We know of projects that have been announced, as you mentioned, things seemingly still on track here for the Supergirl movie to come out maybe next year. And then of course we know the Clayface movie seems to have been
Yeah.
really like hot shotted. It appears, that's going to be moving forward in production, which does that come out before we get a Batman movie? Would
Right.
feel kind of
Will
weird.
will Batman be in that?
Right, yeah. Lots of questions here about how this goes forward here, but I don't think that James Gunn, I mean the point that we seem to get here is that James Gunn really doesn't believe in doing this anyway, but the way that he feels comfortable, which seems to be, hey, this is a good start. So I am cautiously optimistic for whatever comes next in this DC universe.
Absolutely couldn't say it better myself, Cal. We will begin to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this special bonus episode where we again gave our kind of stream of consciousness thoughts. Definitely want to hear from everybody who's listening what they thought of the movie. Hit us up at DCAU Review on all the socials, mostly Instagram and Twitter/X are where you can find the quickest responses, but we will try to get to you on some of the other ancillary ones as well. Great ways to support us. Of course, you could subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. That's a great free way. If it lets us give us a rating, give us 5 stars, write a review, any of that stuff helps us out. And if you want to support us in a more direct monetary way, you can do it in one of 2 ways. One is to head to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, and you can either become a monthly supporter or or just give us a one-time gift. Like we have a couple of listeners who do that as well. Either way, in fact, there's even tiers for your support, and at certain higher tier or super friend tier, you can even ask us a question, which we will read out on the air of our main show. And we look forward to hearing more questions about this, about the DCAU cartoons that we review each and every week on the main show. But and of course, there's also links in the show notes to our merch store where you can pick yourself up a hat or a pin or a sticker or anything like that. So, other great way to support us if you so desire. However, whatever comes next, I've had a lot of fun discussing this with you today, Cal. And until next time, until we have another exciting installment of this new live-action DC universe to talk about. Until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.